We have a testimony in the house, people of God. Oh, you can do so much better than that, people of God. So your testimony basically begins with, I guess we would say, a very difficult experience that we had sort of at the early part of last year. Maybe you can begin telling us about that.
Yes. First of all, we want to thank God for this opportunity to testify and to show our gratitude to God. But we also want to thank our spiritual father and our spiritual mother for this opportunity to be in this family and to have such kind of people to be with us all through everything that we've been through. Yeah, so our testimony starts early last year. Yeah, we were prepared. We were pregnant and happy and preparing for our firstborn son. We did shopping. We were choosing names. It was amazing. It was really amazing. And then one Monday morning, things changed. It was very fast. In a matter of a day, we came from getting clothes and planning names to planning a funeral. So yeah, I dropped my wife at work that day, and then in few hours I was called. She's been taken to hospital. Yeah, she works in a hospital, but she was also taken to the hospital, and she had a complication which led to the loss of the baby, and she was also in danger of losing her own life. So it was tough.
So this is, and throughout the course of the pregnancy, had there been, were there warning signs, were there problems, were there issues that sort of, were you expecting something like this was even possible?
No, really, it was, that first pregnancy was smooth. It was just like any other, every time we go to the doctors, and it was just smooth. So there were no like red flags or anything. It was just sudden.
Wow. And so at this point, maybe doctor, you can tell us a bit more about what happened. How far along were you at this time? And, if you could just shed some light there.
So at this time, I was at around 34 weeks of pregnancy. And so labor was a little bit far off, especially that it was my first pregnancy. So it was like 1 month or so of waiting. It was just any other day going to work in the morning, in a meeting. And then suddenly I just started feeling so bad, like my stomach started aching. I started feeling like vomiting and this kind of weakness. So I just decided to get out of the meeting and seek assistance from one of the nurses that was around the ward that I was working in. All of a sudden, decision was made to rush me to the hospital just for a quick checkup. And on arrival, an ultrasound was done, and the doctor had the diagnosis of what we call abruptio placenta, whereby the placenta suddenly detaches. So the placenta is the organ that supplies food and oxygen to the baby. So when it detaches from the womb, it means the baby is denied of nutrition. So by the time they're doing ultrasound, they're like, no, the baby is no more. So with that complication also, the mother bleeds so much. So you have to intervene so early to ensure that the bleeding does not also kill the mother. So from there, they had to induce labor and make sure that I deliver as soon as possible, so that I don't bleed so much or my organs to suffer any more complications.
So this is I can't imagine it, because we're talking about 34 weeks in. You're maybe looking at the last stretch, basically a month or so, and as your husband put it, smooth pregnancy, no red flags, and from being dropped off at work on a Monday to then needing to, under emergency, essentially deliver a child, and to be told that they're already no more even before that. What was the impact on you like? How did you guys, how did it affect you? Because I can't imagine being in that place.
Yeah, it was really hard, because actually I remember the day we buried the child, and my wife was still at the hospital, so she could not even be there. So I was there, and it was difficult. It was difficult at that moment, and it was just every time you think of it, it just is just not a good space to be. It was really difficult. Yeah, we thank God that we believe in God, but even though at that moment it was really difficult for both of us.
And I guess, and what about for you, doctor, as having born this child, I imagine having heard the heartbeats and felt the kicks, what's the immediate experience after something like that?
Well, immediately I was in denial. Like, when you're in this state of shock and you're just like, no, my baby's alive. So I think throughout the process of them taking me through labor, I was just still confessing that this baby is going to cry the moment I deliver. So it's up to until that stage when they gave me the baby, and I'm looking at the baby, I'm assessing the baby, I'm like, there's no signs of life. So that's when it started just becoming so overwhelming, and they had to take away the baby. So that's when the reality actually started hitting. But yeah, throughout the process, it was really painful. And but one thing we're really thankful is that we had so much peace throughout the mourning and recovery period. So even though we are mourning, but we're just having this peace that it looks physically difficult and a very sad place to be, but we just had this hope and peace inside that everything will be fine at the end of the day.
Okay. And then we go from there, and I think it's probably the same year later on that we found out we were pregnant again, yes? So what was the journey of sort of, discovering that, okay, we're having another child? What was how did we find out? How did we feel when we found out? What was that experience?
Yeah, so it was about 9 months later, around October, and so yeah, my wife started complaining some pains, and and it was like we really never expected to be pregnant at this moment, because after that experience we kind of decided, like, for this time we should focus on career and just try to just for recovery, for just to make sure everything is okay before we go to that. So we that time, and then after she started complaining about this and that, and then we decided to check, and then we found out that we are pregnant.
And doctor, what was your mood? Was it a celebration? Was it, yay, we're having a baby? What was your getting the results? What was that like for you?
Well, this time around, as my husband just said, it was really unexpected. So, and we are still recovering from the first experience. So we were just like in denial, and then also started being scared, like, how can this happen at such a time? And then the memories of the previous experience just brought this fear. The whole aspect of pregnancy just became something so fearful. So I started being scared and worried, like, okay, how is this going to be? What's the outcome? So it wasn't that excitement per se, but more of thoughts of worry and anxiety.
And you began your clinics and your, sort of the medical processes. What was the experience when you first sort of attended clinic?
So now, because of the knowledge of the first outcome, I had to consult the doctors immediately. So I did my first clinic. And at this time already, I was having these abdominal pains and body weakness. So it was quite strange, because I was like, no, these symptoms are too extreme. Why are they happening at this stage of pregnancy? So we went to the doctors, and the doctors took some lab tests as well as an ultrasound. So it was like around 6 weeks. So the ultrasound only showed like the housing is present, but the heartbeats of the baby are not yet there. And we also did an important test of progesterone, because now she's like, why are you having this abdominal pain? They're not supposed to be intense at this stage of pregnancy. So progesterone is like the hormone of pregnancy. So she found it's like around 22, which is a little bit on the lower side. And considering, again, my history, so looking at all these factors, she's like, yes, there's pregnancy, but there's a high possibility that this pregnancy may end up in a miscarriage. So she had like a diagnosis of a threatened abortion.
How far, let's say in weeks, or at what stage of the pregnancy was this?
So that was like 6 weeks of pregnancy, very early.
So it's like immediately after you found out, while you're still sort of recovering and you're still dealing with everything that has happened, the first thing the doctor says to you is probably going to happen again.
Yes, and now when you go to the doctors, you have to tell them like the previous history of the pregnancy and what happened. So the moment I mentioned that complication, she started like teaching me again, like, this complication, there's a risk of it reoccurring, so we have to take good care of you. This is like a high-risk pregnancy. So she even had to prescribe some medications, which are just because of that complication that happened, to try and prevent any possible factors that can lead to that same complications. So I had a lot of medications, including the supplements of the progesterone, which was low, and other kind of medications, plus the nutritional kind of supplements. But also she, at that time also she said I needed to do a complete bed rest, because now of that severe abdominal pain that I was having and the weakness, to try to nurture the pregnancy and avoid the abortion if it was possible.
So at 6 weeks, you've been prescribed complete bed rest. You've been diagnosed with a threatened abortion. You are being put on a round of medication. you're experiencing symptoms and pains that you didn't even have the first time around. All in all, it's that must have been very taxing, just in terms of that emotional level and that mental level.
Yeah, because now even with the knowledge of all that was happening, like medically, I understood like the risks involved. I understood what it means when you have those abdominal pains, how an abortion can just take place that instantly. So I had so much understanding of it, so it added more stress, and I knew also stress was a factor to even enhance that abortion. But with all that was happening, it was just inevitable to not have stress.
Yeah, and with all that, it was difficult because now that she has the knowledge, the medical knowledge. So at home, sometimes she was trying to act okay, but it was tough, and she was battling that knowledge. Komba, I know it, I know this, I know that, and even at night, sometimes you can see someone sleeping, but they are not at peace. They're sleeping, but they are not at peace. It was hard.
Wow. Okay. And so, basically, with all of that, with that diagnosis, with that state, and I imagine when everything is causing you stress, and then you also being a medical professional, like your husband has really highlighted very well. For me, you can give me my medical results, and like I don't really know what it says. I've just gone it and dawa. But I imagine if I know how to read it and I know what it is saying, and the fact that you've said that stress also makes a situation worse. So imagine how bad it is that you have the results that are causing you stress, and you know that stress is bad, so you're also going to stress about stressing about the results. And but I believe at this time you managed to talk to someone.
Yes, so at this time we had an opportunity to speak with the man of God, our spiritual father. And the moment we went into the room, we didn't even start talking. He started prophesying. It was amazing because he started implying about pregnancy that we have not even said. And at this time, you cannot see. So he started, like asking us now about the sex of the baby, just trying to imply that there's this pregnancy. And so after that, he went on and he started speaking about what is the real issue. He started, actually, last time my wife used the best word. He started, you say it's spiritual diagnosis. Yeah, because he started telling us what was the real issue. That the real issue is not even the physical issue, but it's the issue of the mind. So he told us that, and then he talked more of how it is spiritually, and also he guided us. He gave us an instruction on that same day on how to safeguard the child spiritually. So he gave us.
Wow.
He gave us the instruction of what to do to raise a specific altar for the child and to sacrifice on that altar. And we are so grateful that we could have someone who can even see that and guide us how to go through all that. Because I can't believe without that we could have made it.
Wow.
But yeah, also he told me specifically, like, doctor, you don't need bed rest. The main thing that you need is a mind rest, because I was prescribed the bed rest. And also at the end, he prayed over us and spoke in the prayer. He spoke so much about the pregnancy, like addressing every aspect of the pregnancy and speaking order, things like the baby turning on time, the state of the uterus, the placenta. So like he organized every aspect of the pregnancy in that prayer.
Hallelujah.
And assured us that it is well, the baby is coming.
Amazing. And so after that, what did you experience?
So I started working on the instruction that the man of God gave me, that now I need more of a mind rest. And it was really true, because the stress was really getting into me. I couldn't sleep peacefully. Like, I would wake up and my husband would tell me, why unashtuka sana usiku? So I would have dreams about labor. I would be so anxious. At times I would just hide and cry so that he doesn't see me. So it seems like now the big challenge was to execute the mind rest. So going on that way, but we also had to do another checkup. So we went for a checkup, and since the progesterone was, the hormone progesterone was a concern, we had to do it again. So initially it was 22, now the visit, that next visit we found out it had gotten even lower. It went to 14. So the doctor was really concerned. She wrote another prescription, like an extra amount of the hormone progesterone again. And at this time she's like, no, we will not officially start you on a clinic, so we don't give these cards. I won't give the card as yet. Let's just make sure that this pregnancy is really viable or valid, because now progesterone going down, it was really pointing that this pregnancy is going to the end of abortion.
Wow. So I think we need to talk about the significance of what you said, of not giving you the clinic sessions or the clinic card. Because by this time, by this second visit, how many weeks in are you?
I was almost 12 weeks. Yeah.
12 weeks.
So like approaching the end of my first trimester.
Normally, my understanding is that you are supposed to get such cards and begin clinic very early. It's strange for somebody not to have one by 12 weeks. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's true. So mothers are encouraged to start clinic early, and the documentations are done in the clinic card. But for my case, the doctor was thinking, no, this might end in abortion, so let's like withhold a bit, delay this, and we'll see as it progresses.
So in other words, medically at this point, they are still not acknowledging that this is a viable pregnancy. It's more like, why should we give you the cards and the documentation and the paperwork for you to have it, and then we lose this child anyway. So it was more like they were buying time. In the harshest way to say, it's more like they were buying time for the pregnancy to end by itself.
Yeah, I think for me that traumatized me even more, because I'm like, so these people are not even acknowledging the pregnancy. And knowing that, okay, this is still on the diagnosis of threatened abortion. So sometimes she wouldn't say it, but she would give me a prescription, like that visit, she gave me a prescription, like, go and buy this medication. Now use this progesterone in another form. So in the prescription, there's a place for diagnosis. So I just could read that, okay, threatened abortion, prescription of progesterone. So some things she didn't have to say, but just the interpretation of things, I knew what she was thinking.
Yes, but now we are at this moment, and there's so much that is seen medically. But on the side of the physical well-being, she was at a better place. Because after that prayer that our father did, she didn't experience any pain from that moment.
Come on.
And then she also started to rest her mind more. So she was getting better, although what is seen in the paper is different.
That's very important. Yeah, we can celebrate God for that because that's amazing. So basically, the physical symptoms were, how would you say, you were feeling better, or the symptoms cleared, or?
Yeah, like after the prayers now, eventually within that week, I started noticing that I don't have that severe abdominal pain again. And I also had this weakness where sometimes I couldn't even stand for a long time. Like I'd stopped doing even the home chores. But all of a sudden, I started gaining strength. Yeah, so physically, even vomiting and kind of nausea, those things, it just stopped. But now the struggle just continues with the mind aspect.
Wow. I think sometimes we need to talk about that more, because it happens for people. You receive a word, you get a word, then you go to test, and then the test result is the same as it was before you had your word. But just because it's not showed up here does not mean God is not already working and God is not already doing something inside of you, that a miracle is not already taking place. And so you went through this, you experienced that clearing of the physical symptoms, but the medical results still sort of remain the same. And now we've gone into basically your second trimester, in the second part of that journey. If you're not familiar with the term, so when we talk about pregnancies, talk about trimesters being the 3 parts of the pregnancy, roughly 3 months each. Doctor, being a doctor, will be like, no, actually this one is like 14 weeks, and this one, but roughly 3 months each. So you have your first trimester, second, and then you go into your third towards delivery. And so what was the experience like as you now went into that second trimester?
Yeah, so eventually in the second trimester, after the progesterone levels having been low in that visit that we went after the prayers, as time went on, now we started seeing the progesterone levels going up again. So it went from the 22, the first one, and then 14, and then 28, and then eventually 40. So these were numbers that now the doctors started seeing that they are satisfactory. So they were like, okay, now at least now we have the hormone levels stable, and this pregnancy can be supported. And even the ultrasounds that we did then, that started showing the heartbeat of the baby. So the aspect of a possible miscarriage, we escaped that. So that was over with. So now the focus in the second trimester was like, now we need to get the baby to develop as fast as possible. Like the first complication happened when I was at 34 weeks. So that the medical management is such that you make sure the mother, the child is matured before the 34 weeks, because there's a risk of that complication to happen at around that same time. So my time was 34. So the doctors are like, we have to make sure by maybe 32 weeks, the baby is already ready for delivery, meaning the weight has to be in good state, the organs have to be matured. So there had to be a kind of acceleration of the development and maturity of the baby.
And how was the journey of the mind that you were on at this time as you went into that second trimester? Who were the people you talked to? What were the things that continued to sustain and help you to build some kind of a peace in that journey?
Yeah, so one person I'd really like to appreciate is our mother. Because throughout this journey, she would really help me to focus my mind on the positive. So at all times, the conversations would be like, Doctor, now at this time you should focus on this thing. Maybe you should just send a clip of a baby, maybe celebration of a baby birthday, those kind of things, just the positive stuff that focus on this baby stuff. And also she started like implying that now you should start planning for the coming of the baby.
Trimester 2.
Yes, start the preparation, like clothes or the kind of things that we buy for the baby. So for me, as much as she's my mother, with this one it was really challenging to obey fully because I was like, I cannot just risk having to deal with, again, distributing those clothes if this pregnancy does not work out. So for me, in my head, I was like, yes, Mom, but in my head, I'm like, I'm not going to shop until I see this baby's here. So yeah, I would watch the videos and it really helped me, like, okay, have certain hope, but there's also still some resistance not to do so much for preparation, but it sustained me to not always be in that state of fear and anxiety.
Hallelujah. Thank God for our spiritual parents in this house.
And also, if I can add there, is we really thank God for the House of Bread family, because even our friends, our close friends, some of them are pastors also, we just had people who were just doing their best to encourage us and to let us focus on the positive. So it's important to have people who are close by, who are really helping you to focus on the positive, and no matter what you're going through.
Awesome. I think during that second trimester, there was also other sort of experiences, encounters, and meetings. Maybe you can share some of that.
Yeah, so we had an opportunity to have a pastor's meeting during that time. I think it was around 24 weeks of pregnancy. So in that pastor's meeting, Baba gave us a prophecy. So he mentioned that there will be an issue with blood pressure in this pregnancy. But he said, but we will pray so that to ensure that the complication that would happen due to the blood pressure do not happen. So whatever the issue that is to come because of blood pressure would not really happen because of the prayers. But also he spoke of the mode of delivery. He mentioned that I would deliver normally, but he saw like a discussion amongst doctors and a certain strain that would make it impossible for me to go through the normal mode of delivery. And also he added that, this child is a gift from God, so all will be well. So those were the main three things that he spoke on that prophecy. After that prophecy, I confirmed to him that actually with the first pregnancy, there was a suspicion that maybe the blood pressure was also an issue that led to that complication. So he's like, okay, it is well. And after that, we also had another opportunity to go for Kingdom Investors Network, where we had a deliverance session. So in this time, we had a session of prayers, And Baba and Mama really prayed for me so intensely with the aspect of the mind and with the aspect of the whole pregnancy. So for me, this was very unique experience because I've never had a tangible experience during prayers whereby I really felt like my mind was being calibrated at that time. I still use this example like it was like an electric shock going through my brain, my mind, like 3 times. It was so intense, and I kept on seeing myself being shocked several times. And after this deliverance session, for the first time, I experienced now a real change with my mind, because all these times it was a lot of stress and encouraging myself and changing my mind, like with so much effort. But after this deliverance session, I experienced this peace in my heart and in my mind that I never experienced before. And I started attaining this courage and boldness. Now I started even seeing that now actually this pregnancy is going to work out, and this baby I will definitely have. So there was so much change. And even my husband started telling me now, for the first time I'm seeing you sleep peacefully through the night. And even those things like crying here and there really stopped. Now I really started focusing on preparation for the baby and having that excitement that indeed the baby is coming.
If I can say, it was like a new person. Because it was this to this. Yani she changed. Kabisa.
As that peace and rest actually
Yeah.
came upon her life.
Yes.
As a result of the ministration of the man of God in this place. When we can celebrate God for having a man in our midst, for having a father.
But also, if I may add, one thing that I forgot to mention now, in that same second trimester, the doctors had a plan for us now to accelerate that maturity of the baby. So in one of the things that was supposed to be done to accelerate the maturity is to give me injections of a medication that assists the baby's lungs to mature so early. So the challenge with these injections is that they also cause the baby's movements, the kicks that the mother feels, to also decrease. So with this, the doctors felt because of now this high-risk pregnancy, like I would have to be admitted during these injections. For some people, they might get them without being admitted, but for me, they're like, you have to be admitted because we don't want to risk missing that the movements of the baby are decreasing because of that first complication, and we're assuming it's because of the injection. So they wanted to admit me so that I can monitor the heartbeats of the baby. So this was one of the plans, and we had an opportunity again for the men and women of God to speak to us, and upon hearing about the plan for injections, Baba started again prophesying about it, and he started saying that I know these injections seem harmless, because even the way I was telling him, I was really advocating that, yes, we need to do these injections, like they're important, but he said they seem harmless, but the challenge with these injections will be in the state of your mind, what it will do to you. And also, he said it in a very wise way that, because of all this concern and desire by the doctors to intervene in this pregnancy, even the mode of delivery will eventually change. So with that already in my mind, I was like, C-section will most likely be the case, because now the doctors want to intervene to ensure that this baby stays alive. And also the third thing that he said on that prophecy is like, I know you've been having a battle of the mind, but now towards the third trimester and towards the end of your pregnancy season, this battle of the mind will really intensify. I'm not prophesying doom, but there will be a challenge of the battle of the mind. Yeah.
And so you had to have this injection basically to aid the growth of the baby and for an admission as well while they were monitoring it. So what happened when you went for that?
Yeah, so on the day of injections, just the moment I stepped into the hospital, so this was my first admission ever since I was last admitted because of that experience of labor and loss of a child. So to my mind, it was like, okay, this is again another admission. So right there, I started panicking, having this anxiety attack, and they immediately started taking my BP and heart rates, and the nurse saw that they just shot up. So they immediately called the doctor and was like, okay, she just came for this admission, but we are seeing that she's not well. And at that time, I think I also started just crying. So it was really something kind of messy. And then, so the doctors had to intervene and rush the admission and keep me under close monitoring. So they still prescribed the injections, but now they had to prescribe more things like fluids to try to lower the blood pressure. And the problem with the rise of the blood pressure that was happening at that stage is that it was causing now the baby to be in a state of distress. So the baby was suffering because of me being in that anxious state and high blood pressure. So they noticed also the heartbeats of the baby were going really high. So when they go really high also, it's an indication that the baby is not in a good state and might need to be removed immediately in order to save the baby. So the doctor changed the management, made the monitoring so close, and alerted the nurse that in case of any further change, she should be alerted so that they can intervene.
So I imagine that that doesn't help, does it? Because what's really happening is the anxiety, it's a strong word, but almost the trauma of being in a hospital, being admitted again while around the third trimester of your pregnancy, with the memory of the fact that the last time this happened, what ended up. So it is really that battle of the mind the man of God had told you, as we come to this stage, it will get stronger. But I imagine now the more attention you're getting, the more people are checking in on you, the more medications are being added. Although the intention is to help, it is actually not helping at all. So what broke that vicious cycle? Because I imagine at that point, left alone, it means that the more stressed you get, the more attention you get, the more it stresses you until the worst will happen. So how did we escape the worst at that time?
Yeah, so at some point I came now to realize that, okay, so this is what the man of God was speaking of, that these injections seem harmless, but the trouble that it will bring to your mind is significant. And I also remembered the prophecy about the blood pressure, that it could be an issue, but they prayed to make sure that it doesn't become an issue. So I realized that actually this is not just a physical thing, but also a spiritual thing. So I contacted some of the pastors and asked them to pray with me. And I just started putting on, I remember that whole night I just started putting on the sermon of our mother about waiting on God. And that day I remember she was like, okay, the way you wait on God is you do it in faith, hope. So it has to be an active thing. So I just had put that part of waiting on God, and also because she kept on giving the examples of Abraham, people who had to wait on the promise of a child. So for me that night, that sermon was really so loud. And eventually around 3 a.m., when they came to do the monitoring, for the first time during that admission, they were like, okay, now the BP is lower and the heart rates are starting to come down. So for the first time, I started getting good news. So by the time it's morning, By the time it's morning and the doctor comes in, already now there was trends of good readings on the monitors.
And so you didn't have, and I imagine then that if you didn't have that word, if you didn't have the message to go back to, if you didn't have the prophetic word from the man of God that went ahead of you, probably we would have had to deliver the baby right there and then.
Yes, most likely, because now I would just dwell on it as a physical problem and think about it as a medical problem, and that was really stressful, knowing that this could trigger like an emergency delivery. And now what was even more stressful is that at this stage the baby was really underdeveloped, the weight was lower, and the injections were just being given. So there's that risk of the baby coming in and not being able to survive. So all these factors just made the whole situation stressful.
Wow. But we thank God for that you were prepared, that you had the tools you needed, the word that was there for you, and you were able to have this done and to be released. And this is now towards the end of the pregnancy. So what was that last few weeks or that last stretch like?
So after the discharge, I was able to come to church the next Sunday. And on that Sunday, I remember again, I had another opportunity to be prophesied on. And the man of God made me aware that, okay, doctor, just check your BP readings in the trend of the BP readings in your previous pregnancy. Compare them to the BP blood pressure readings of this pregnancy. You'll see that evidently that God is at work in this pregnancy. So I went back home and looked at the trends. Then I realized that just normally my blood pressure is usually on the lower side compared to the average of most individuals. So I realized that in the first pregnancy, the card, it showed actually it had increased to the level of the normal, that which is high to my reading. So with this pregnancy, I came to realize that my blood pressure reading was actually maintained in the very pre-pregnancy state, we say. So it was just like I'm not even pregnant, because in pregnancy we expect a slight rise in the blood pressure. So in this pregnancy, it just kept being on the pre-pregnancy state. It never raised anyhow.
That's amazing. That is amazing, because what you're saying basically is, as a result of pregnancy, there is an expectation of an elevated blood pressure that happens. But throughout the journey of this pregnancy, that had not happened with you, and things had remained stable. And it brings me back to what we said before about how the physical symptoms cleared, but the medical results seemed to not be changing. But we discover now that actually God was working. Yes. There was a miracle that was taking place. There was an intervention that was going on. Yes. Even though we had not seen it until this last stage when the man of God pointed you to it and said, look at this. And that's amazing.
And to emphasize that, the day we had that, like we were told to check on the BP, actually I reminded my wife, the previous pregnancy, she would, her feet would be swollen for several times. But in this pregnancy, it never happened.
Mothers in this house can relate to that one better. The closed shoes in the morning, open shoes in the evening type of thing.
Yeah, that's true, because now the significance of the sweet swelling is also that it indicates that the blood pressure may be high. So in the first pregnancy, the feet would be swollen and the blood pressure really was high. But in this pregnancy, I maintained wearing closed shoes throughout. I never wore open shoes because of the limitations of swollen limbs, but just maybe as a choice, but not because of the limitation of the pregnancy.
Hallelujah.
So eventually we approached now the 34 weeks. So 34 weeks was like the dreadful time, the critical week, because now this is where there's that event of the pregnancy loss. So the doctors really wanted a close monitoring at this stage. So again, I was prescribed another bed rest. And with this bed rest, I had to do counting of the kicks that the baby makes. So I'd have to count in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening to make sure that now the baby is kicking. And I was to make sure that if there's any changes, decrease of the number of times the baby kicks, I immediately go to the hospital so that they deliver the baby, because it would indicate that there's something wrong. Maybe the bleeding again happened and the baby could be at risk of also dying again. So this was just traumatizing, because for me, it just got amplified and it brought this fear, in the extent that now it became like a norm. Every morning I'd listen and I'm like, if I don't feel even one kick, I'll start like pushing my tummy, turning, tossing in the bed, just going up and down to like push the baby to just even kick even once to give me that assurance. So I'll just wake up with this fear like, is the baby kicking? And then I'll start doing these maneuvers. I know like normally there's a time the baby doesn't kick, but for me it just created this kind of fear that what if he doesn't kick again? So I would forcefully make the baby kick in order to just satisfy that desire or anxiety that is the baby kicking. So I started realizing, okay, so what Baba said about now the battle of the mind intensifying towards the end of pregnancy is actually manifesting, because now I started also thinking about now what will happen in labor. Can I really go through the normal delivery and wait and see if the baby comes out normal? And then to make matters worse, now at this stage of pregnancy, we started getting other bad news from the hospital. Like, would go one clinic, they'll tell us, we see the umbilical cord around the child. Yes, I know it happens, it's normal, it might not affect the baby, but also I know the negative effect. Like if there's an umbilical cord, it can strangulate the baby. So my imagination will just go to the negative, like, what if the baby is strangulated by this umbilical cord? So sometimes I would even update my mom. Tell her, Mom, like, today's ultrasound has umbilical cord. So she's like, doctor, that is normal. People, but for me, I'm like, what if there's that? So, but I had hope, but I saw really the battle of the mind intensifying, and I had to start fighting it. So sometimes, again, we went, and then they were telling us a new discovery. We are seeing a fibroid. We're like, oh, my God. Where is the fibroid coming from? I never had a fibroid. So I started imagining, what if this fibroid brings again an issue?
No, wait. I'm not a doctor, but since when do you start seeing fibroids in the 30th week? like the reason I pause and highlight there is for you to really see that what the man of God was warning them about, the battle of the mind, that this is not a medical thing, but there is that spiritual and mental component to deal with that aspect going on. Because these are strange things to start hearing at 30 weeks, 32 weeks. It doesn't happen that way, at least to my knowledge.
And actually, when she was looking for the baby to kick, and we thank God that this baby is like he knew. Because I think he would kick more than any other baby I've seen. He could kick so fast, so hard, and so just to assure her that I'm here, I'm good.
Wow. So tell us how this last week and that last process went through.
So now the 34 weeks set in. So the Sunday that was ushering me now to the 34 weeks was that Sunday that Baba declared that next week, now my 34 week, was the week of victory. So he made so much declaration about this coming week is your week of victory. He started mentioning even days like Monday, you'll see a certain dimension of victory, of which Tuesday will give you a greater dimension. So he proclaimed that there will be no defeat. And one thing that I held on so much, he said, your children will experience victory. So for me, that was like a lifeline. I was like, yes, this week, even though...
This was the declarations in the service.
Yes, so even though medically in this week, it's the most critical week, a matter of life and death, but now the man of God has said, even your children experiencing victory. So I was like, my child will experience this victory this week and will go through. It will not happen again. So for me that week, I was just playing in my mind those declarations of victory, that I'll see the victory Monday to Sunday. I'll continue seeing the victory. So being a sensitive week, also the doctors prescribed like 2 ultrasounds to be done on Monday and on Friday. And also the bed rest and the close monitoring of the baby kicks. So it happened on that Friday when I went to do the ultrasound. The results came out that there are certain changes that they were seeing in the placenta. So like some form of what we call placenta lakes, which are like small accumulations of bleeding. So this is something that any woman would show in their ultrasound at the end of pregnancy, something like of an aging thing that happens. But for me, the doctors was like, we cannot take any risk as long as there's any change in placenta, even if it was supposed to be normal. But for you, because of this history, we have to intervene. So then I remembered even the last prophecy that we got was like, because of the concern and the desire of the doctors to intervene, then the mode of delivery would change. And for sure, the mode of delivery changed that day. And the doctors was like, no, we'll have to operate on you. The good thing is the baby, he's having a good weight, and that's one thing we are really grateful for, because throughout the pregnancy, the baby really accelerated in weight gain. Like he would always be beyond the expected weight in that week. So even at that 34 weeks, he was already in the weight of 36 weeks. So the doctors were like so comfortable, like, okay, this baby is really ready to come at this stage. He's in a good state. And also the ultrasound, they'd seen that he's showing some lung movements, so he was able to breathe on his own. So it's like he has a very good chance of survival. We cannot risk any more waiting. So that day they rushed me to the theater. So everything happened so fast. I like the specialists themselves that day. For the first time, I started seeing specialists doing the junior works. That day they were rushing to get investigations done and to secure a theater for me. And another specialist for anesthesia was called in, making sure that my anesthesia was really good, because they were like, this is a high-risk patient, so make sure the anesthesia is good. For me, that was just favor, because I was like, yes, this is the kind of anesthesia I want. So within 1 hour, the baby was delivered.
Within 1 hour?
Yes.
Wow.
So the good news was that the baby scored beautifully, had good points, and did not need any ICU care, because that was the main risk, that if now this baby is coming at 34 weeks, this is a premature delivery. And children who are premature, they usually suffer things like breathing problems and infections that would lead them to not survive. But to our surprise, a bouncing baby that is healthy came, and it didn't even need any kind of monitoring. And they gave me the baby, actually, right there.
Right there?
Immediately, yeah. Once I woke up from the surgery, they were like, here's your baby. You're going to the ward.
Wow. Come on, people of God.
So to just cement the miracle that I had, it happened that now, when I was in the ward, I was in the center, like my bed was in the center, and I was positioned between two other ladies who also underwent cesarean section. So with these two ladies, both of them, the cesarean section was done at a time when they were well advanced in pregnancy during the normal time. But the amazing thing, when we were talking, I was asking them, so how many kilos is your baby? So each one of them was telling me the kilos which were way lower compared to my baby, and yet my baby was like 4 weeks before them.
Wow.
Yeah, but also even the recovery aspect, because of the kind of anesthesia that they gave me, I found myself to be like the strong one. Like everyone would have a certain kind of complaints. I remember the nurse coming in and saying, I'm giving you these painkillers, but she was like, don't you need any painkillers? And she was like, are you taking any drugs? Because how come you're just so strong? So I found myself having this smooth recovery and ability to be able to take care of the baby despite having gone through the operation.
Come on, somebody, we can celebrate Jesus in this place. That's a powerful testimony. Is there anything you guys want to say as we wrap up?
We are here essentially to truly thank God for this amazing miracle in our life. And we thank the family of House of Bread for being there through everything. And we especially thank our spiritual father and our spiritual mother for always being there for us. So thank you all. And we are also, at this moment, would like to give a Thanksgiving offering to God for all that He has done through this process. We have seen God. We have seen Jehovah Limitless.
Wow.
We have seen Him.
Hallelujah. Somebody can celebrate Jesus in this place.